My name is Riley Kidder. I live in upstate New York near Buffalo on Chautauqua Lake. And I was fortunate to be appointed by President Clinton in 1994 to the American Battle Monuments Commission. And it was interesting. My name had gone in to be on the American Battle Monuments Commission. And frankly, I hadn't heard anything for over a year about it. And the Clinton White House was pretty slow at filling these kind of positions. And one night I got a phone call. Jane and I were just getting in bed, and she said, "Riley, this is the White House." I said, "Oh, sure, it's the White House." So I picked up the phone, and yeah, it was the White House. And the personnel director, Veronica Biggins, said, "Would you be willing to serve on the American Battle Monuments Commission?" And I laughed, and I said, "Well, does McDonald's have golden arches? I mean, of course, I'd love to serve if the president would appoint me." And she said, "Well, that's the good news." She said, "The bad news is you got to be down here next week because the new commission is going to be sworn in, and you're taking off for Rome and then to Normandy for the 50th anniversary events." And so we had to scurry and hurry and so on and so forth. But that's how it really happened. And it was on that trip that I also met a newly appointed commissioner, as I was, and that's Hayden Williams. And he's the person who really became the driving force behind the World War II Memorial site and design process that I became involved with at the American Battle Monuments Commission. Hayden was a smart, serious type of guy. And I was just sort of getting to know all the new commissioners on this first trip for the 50th anniversary events. And I saw him walking around through the Sicily Rome Cemetery, and he had a notebook in his hand, and I was taking notes. And I said, "Well, Hayden, what are you taking notes for?" And he said, "Well, we may have some good things here in these quotations and in the granite that we could use at the World War II Memorial." I said, "What World War II Memorial?" That's when I realized finally realized that the new commission had a new job, which was the World War II Memorial. So here I am, a neophyte, sort of younger guy. I didn't know each other. But I told him at the time on that trip, I said, "I don't know how this is all going to go down, but I'd love to be involved in the World War II Memorial in Washington." And Hayden, very strong person and a former ambassador to Micronesia, and had retired from as president of the Asia Foundation in San Francisco. And as a matter of fact, I found out later, and Hayden told me this, that he was a Republican, and he almost didn't get on the commission because he wasn't in the right political party. But Bill Crow was his good friend, interceded at the White House, and Hayden, thank God, became a member of that commission because he was the driving force of our committee. Anyway, I got to know Hayden on that trip, and then the American Battle Monuments Commission is an interesting organization, and it was at the time, it was very much, and still is, I think, an Army-oriented operation because it had been started by General Pershing after the First World War to bury America's war dead in Europe. And then it had, of course, had to do the same after World War II. Very prominent, or not well known by the American public, but within the military, it's an honor to serve on the American Battle Monuments Commission. And so there's 11 commissioners appointed by the president. And when the president changes, as it did with me, I was no longer a commissioner, but we'd pretty much by then, after 8 years of being there, actually 6 of the 8-year term, because we were not appointed till 1994. When George W. Bush put his commission in, we had pretty much got the site and design approved, and the money had been raised, did a terrific financial campaign, and so that's, with the ABMC, get back to that organization, this is something that they didn't usually do, but in the legislation, they were required to build this memorial. And it's a story in itself, I think, as to why ABMC was designated, but it ended up in our laps. And initially, Hayden tried to put together a joint commission or committee with the World War II Memorial Advisory Board, another group of Clinton-appointed people, appointed by the president, to sort of guide the process in the World War II memorial. However, it became clear that Williams was going to be the leader, and he started a site and design committee. And I was not initially on it, but he also said he would invite any members of the commission to come to meetings, even if they weren't officially on the committee. And so I would go down for tours of potential sites and things like that were going on, and got to know Hayden, of course, a lot better in that process. And then in 1995, in the fall of 1995, Governor Kerry had announced that he would no longer want to be on the committee. I think Kerry really wanted to build a museum, not a memorial, and he was busy doing other things. And what Hayden asked me at that time, would I come on the committee? So that's when I went on, is in late 1995, and became great and close personal friends with Hayden Williams. And one of the great things that ever happened to me was getting to know him and meeting him. Hayden's drive, I think, came from the fact that he was a World War II veteran and had served in the Pacific in the Navy. And he had realized, and I think that generation had done monumental things, and that if there was going to be a memorial to memorialize that he told me, he said, I want this to be my last hurrah. He said, he was, 15, 20 years older than me. So he said, I'm getting old, but he said, I'm going to give it my damnedest to get this thing done. And of course he did. And once he became chairman of this committee, and I think it was also very helpful that at the time, the chairman, General Fred Warner, again, had been appointed by President Clinton. He was teaching school up in Boston and graduate school and so forth. And he was a retired 4-star, but he knew that he didn't have the time to put into it. So he asked Hayden to chair this committee. So under other chairmen, it may never have happened, because they would, some of the chairmen of the ABMC have been noted for keeping things pretty close to their vest and not using committees much. But the committee became a very important part of the process. And but even if we disagreed on our little committee of 4 or 5 people on the site and design, when we went to the approving commissions or to the ABMC, we were unanimous. I mean, we were Hayden people. I'll tell you what the biggest thing that Williams took credit for, and he said, I hope that I am given credit for it, and that is the site. The initial thing that had to happen was to find a site. And I've done a lot of research on this and gone to Brown University and gone through J. Carter Brown's papers to confirm it, who was the chairman of the Commission of Fine Arts at the time. And I've gone through Williams' papers at the National Defense University. And then just based upon what he had told me and my own experience, we walked towards the end of that reflecting pool on basically the end of a long day of looking at potential sites, and it was rainy and overcast. And he stopped our little group at the end of the reflecting pool and he said, this is where this memorial should be. And I'll be damned. I mean, he just hung on to that and pretty soon started to win people over. And by July, in August of 1995, J. Carter Brown had said, all right, we'll give you the site, but you've got to work with us, and so forth and so on. And that became, and as Hayden said, what makes the memorial significant is as significant, I guess you could say, as it is it's right on the axis, the east-west axis of the National Mall. It's between Lincoln and Washington. And it's, you couldn't have a more prime piece of real estate in the country. And Hayden felt that it deserved, World War II generation deserved a site like that. And he wouldn't budge, and we fought it, and we had tremendous opposition to the site in Washington. first of all, the people that live in Washington were involved in what the federal city should be and look like and everything else. There was a strong group of people who feel that no more building of memorials should be done. There's too many memorials on the mall or in the core area of the mall. And hey, they've got a point. There's a lot of memorials there, and it's sort of overwhelming. And they had the non-voting, I think her name was Norton, congresswoman from DC. There were some softball fields that were going to become a part of what we were doing. And, well, we can't get rid of softball fields. We don't have enough of them now. And in the early days, the opposition had, you might say, co-opted some of official Washington. But as the redesign began to take place and people began to realize that it would fit there, that it would not interrupt the vista of Lincoln, that it would basically reframe it maybe and make it more beautiful, that vista, from that angle from 17th Street. But it wasn't going to block anything. And there was a real, at the time, an urgency in the Congress, I think, to get it done because of the age of the veterans. Thousands were dying, or 1,000 a day, they used to say back in those days, were dying from World War II, that there were fewer veterans all the time. So there was an urgency politically, and once we had the site, that was critical, and then we had to fight to keep it. But I think in retrospect, Williams was absolutely right. And J. Carter Brown said it himself. He said, World War II deserves a site like this. There's not many other things that would rise to the level in the 20th century that would engage the whole nation, brought unity to the country, and accomplished the purposes which the energized country undertook in the Second World War. And he said, if there is a justification for the East-West axis on 17th Street, this is it, Second World War. So it became a matter of what it looked like or was going to look like. But I don't think the official Washington really ever doubted it would be there. Our old working group of General Foote, Helen Fagan, myself, Frank Moore, who was one of Jimmy Carter's chief people, and Hayden constituted the Site and Design Committee, which later on became known as the World War II Committee. But we were not the committee, by the way, dealing with finance. I mean, Bob Dole and Fred Smith from FedEx did a terrific job heading up a campaign to raise the money for it. They were backed up by a tremendous staff that the American Battle Monuments Commission under John Hurling had put together. So that process was going along in parallel to what we were doing. There were turning points, of course, in the process. One was that January 1995 day when Hayden stopped us at the end of the reflecting pool, and this is 6 months before J. Carter Brown ever come around to it. So I give Hayden a credit for it, and said, this is where it ought to be. And then, of course, we had an announcement. We had to have a national competition for who's going to design it. What's it going to look like at this site? And there were 6 semifinalists, and the final finalist was Friedrich St. Florian, who had been the dean of the Rhode Island School of Design. And in July 1997, this is after the competition was over and Friedrich's plan had been approved in concept, at least by the American Battle Monuments Commission. We had to go for the approval of the concept to the Commission of Fine Arts. And the Commission of Fine Arts said, no, what you've come up with, we like the idea of lowering the reflecting pool, rebuilding the reflecting pool in the old Olmsted design, and having some architecture around it, but it's too big what you've proposed, because we had asked for interior space, and Friedrich had suggested some berms, which were huge mounds of earth that people could walk through to get an understanding of the war. In other words, sort of a museum component. And, you know, J. Carter Brown and the Commission of Fine Arts said, no, you can't. It's too overpowering. It's too much for the site. And so they turned it down. Well, Hayden and I talked Hayden into coming up here and spending the weekend on Chautauqua Lake where I live. And after that, of course, he was really down in the dumps, and all of us were. And he came up here on Friday afternoon, and on Saturday morning, we're sitting here near where I'm sitting right now. And he said, I got to call Friedrich. He said, so we gave him the phone. He called Friedrich. And of course, Friedrich was down in the dumps. How you doing, Friedrich? And the silence on the other end of the line. And, well, Friedrich, have you ever heard of Oliver Smith, General Smith? I hope I got the name right. But he said, no. He said he was a Marine general in the 1950s, and he was surrounded by 300,000 Chinese troops in North Korea. And things didn't look good. In the middle of the winter, Chosin Reservoir. And the press asked General Smith, are you going to surrender? Are you going to retreat, General Smith? He said, hell no, we're just going to advance in a different direction. And Hayden sort of chuckled and all of a sudden I could hear Friedrich. There was a pause on the other end. And Friedrich remembers this too, because he and I have discussed this event. And well, Friedrich, are you willing to advance with us in a little different direction, but remain our designer? Because if we would have gone back and had a new competition and all that, another couple of years would have been added on to this whole process. And yeah, I'll work with you. And because, as Hayden said, you know, J. Carter Brown left the door open because the site was appropriate, he thought, and the lowered pool would work. And so we began this redesign process in the committee for the next 3 years. We met almost monthly in Washington. And then we'd take our ideas or Friedrich's ideas, basically, maybe massage them a little bit. And then they would go over to the Commission of Fine Arts. Often Carter Brown would come in what was called an offsite visit and come to the Cosmos Club where Hayden and I stayed and have discussions about, well, have you tried this, have you tried that, and have you talked to so-and-so and this, and then we had to have formal hearings also before Brown, but he and Hayden became collaborators to get this thing done. And Hayden always said, I hope that J. Carter Brown gets his due, and we got to hand it off to Hayden and Brown when it came to this design business. Friedrich did it, and Friedrich had a lot and most of the ideas as to how to do it. But things did get tweaked and changed because of input from people like Brown. And the thing got done. There were some huge construction problems that ended up had to be addressed. But the biggest being that the memorial is built on the old lagoon of the tidal basin. It's a landfill site. And so in order to stabilize all the foundation for that stone World War II memorial, the huge weight of the stone and everything, they had to go down to bedrock, which is about 40 feet down, and secure the whole World War II memorial, and then build a concrete foundation, you might say, to keep the water out, and all of the quicksand and all the other stuff has been a problem in that area of the mall because it wasn't that way before. It was a lagoon. I mean, it was a swamp. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of Cannon when he was a Speaker of the House. He wouldn't let them build the Lincoln Memorial down there. He says, you're not going to put my Lincoln in that goddamn swamp. And he lost an election. And whoever the president was at the time, he said, well, he's not a speaker right now. We're going to put it in that swamp. People think now that, the Lincoln Memorial has always been there. Well, it wasn't always there. And but the World War II Memorial there were some construction challenges. Let me just tell you my last meeting, and I don't think I was a commissioner at that time, but we got invited down by PX Kelly to sort of meet the new commission coming in, which was a nice gesture on his part. And J. Carter Brown had, the decisions were being, the type of stone had already been decided upon, the granite that was going to be used for most of it. And I think it was Kershaw granite. And, but J. Carter Brown wanted to see it on the site. And he said, I want to see the straight cut stone, and I want to see what's called 9-cut and some other, and basically the difference between the two is that another machining process goes through and puts almost invisible grooves in the stone. But when we looked at it, and Brown was there, and his health wasn't very good. And ended up, he didn't live much longer after that. But he said, we were approving the 9-cut stone for all the vertical architecture here. Nothing else can be used. And of course, Barry Owenby went, he said, another $2.5 million. What's $2.5 million when you got a $150 million project? But anyway, that was one of my last memories of being there on the construction. And if you dig back into the archives at the Friends of the World War II Memorial, there's a picture there of the old Site and Design Committee, which Hayden now had renamed the old working group, the OWG. He kept us involved, even though we weren't officially had power to do anything. But we have some hard hats on, and we raise them up and cheering, you might say, with a Lincoln Memorial in the background. That was that day that Brown had looked at the stone and made the decision of what it would be. At the event of 2004, the dedication, Hayden, of course, got all the old group together. And we sort of had a sub-headquarters up at the Cosmos Club and had dinner there. And after dinner, he said, let's go down to the memorial and see it at night. So we all hopped in taxis and we drove down there to, of course, 17th Street was still blocked off. And there were veterans walking around and a great spirit in Washington. And people, are you a World War II veteran? To Hayden said, yes. And he asked me, I must look old now. I said, no, I'm not. But there was just a terrific spirit of celebration in the air. And of course, the memorial at night, we spent a lot of time on lighting and making sure that it had a visibility at night, and yet not an overpowering visibility that would shrink the importance of Lincoln when it's lighted, for example, or the Washington Monument. So I think it came out, if people haven't been down at the World War II Memorial at night, it's worth going out down there just to see it, and how the lighting just makes it a different and yet more beautiful place in a way at night. So we ended the dedication with our old group, and I think Friedrich came over to the Cosmos Club, Ray Caskey, and some of the design team people, Jim Van Sweden may have come over. But we had a beautiful day down there, and we're no longer sitting at the dais up where the big shots are, but that's politics. The important things that have happened in Washington take time. The Civil War ended in 1865. The Lincoln Memorial wasn't completed until 1922. I mean, George Washington, the first president of the United States, the founding of the country. During the Civil War, you see pictures, and that was 60, 70 years after the founding of the country. Here's a half-finished Washington Monument. And if you look at the Washington Monument today, and you can see a little change in the stone about 1/3 of the way up into the snow, the color changes a little bit. Well, they stopped construction for 10 or 20 years because they didn't have the money. And their war came along. And the Washington Monument became a bivouac area for the Union troops to put their tents up and stuff. So I think one of the lessons is it took some time to get the World War II Memorial, but that's the way history sometimes sifts out the wheat from the chaff. It's overpowering for me to go there. I haven't been there now in 4 or 5 years, but I need to get back down. It's not just, you don't go in there saying, well, look, I was a part of this. We did it. Everybody did it. I mean, the country came in with the money. It was an incredible collaborative process. It was a political fight that we had to overcome. I mean, it wasn't just a walk in the park. Friedrich used to say, getting this thing approved is sort of like World War II. That wasn't a walk in the park either. Well, to me, I hope that it's a memorial to a time. It's not meant to glorify war. It's meant to talk about what our country did, maybe its most critical moment in the 20th century, to turn things around in the world, really. I mean, it saved democracy, basically. And our two enemies that we fought with a policy that there shall be no unconditional, there'll be unconditional surrender. There's not going to be, you can't go back and let the same people run it. And that was true in both countries, Japan and Germany. And those two defeated countries are now our greatest allies, really, in Europe and the Pacific. I mean, and the United Nations was formed, and women began to come out and work in the workplace. They were needed in their factories. Well, when the war ended, we're going to still keep working. And with a desire that the memorial not be a somber, oh my God, what happened kind of place, but a place that, hey, things ended up better at the end. I mean, our enemies became our friends, and our way of life as a democracy was preserved. I appreciate this opportunity to be a part of the educational programming at the Friends of the World War II Memorial. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Again, I appreciate this opportunity.